Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We've done some pretty crazy deep dives in the past, but this one might take the cake. We're talking AI voters.
Yeah.
You guys sent us a bunch of research about this AI agent named P. Right,
Right.
designed to be like your average undecided voter in Pennsylvania. And get this, P ended up voting for Trump.
It is fascinating. One of the things that we try to do on this show is really get into the nuts and bolts of things. And
Yeah.
this is a great opportunity to see how AI processes information, especially in something as complicated as a presidential
Well,
election.
thanks,
We've
yeah.
got all this data on P's journey to figure out what made them decide to vote the way they did.
So we're really getting a sneak peek into the AI thought process.
Exactly.
I am so ready for this.
Let's do it.
Let's get started. So where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, we start with P at the very beginning.
Okay.
Like truly independent, like a blank slate, mimicking that undecided voter in a swing state. But what's interesting?
What? Early on in the simulation, P actually showed some interest in Harris.
Really? What was it about Harris that P liked?
It seems like P was really drawn to her stances on healthcare and economic security.
Okay, so those issues were resonating with P's programming.
It seems that way.
Okay, so then how did P end up shifting over to Trump? What caught P's attention?
Well, a couple of the things stood out. One was Trump's stance on border control.
Okay.
He was very vocal about that, and that seemed to resonate with P, and also his focus on economic growth. Also, the law and order messaging.
I see.
That seemed to resonate as well.
So kind of a mix of economic concerns and this idea of security and safety.
Exactly.
Was there a particular turning point where P really started to lean towards Trump?
There were a few moments that seemed to solidify P's decision, and one that really comes to mind is a Trump ad
Yeah.
that used the phrase "Bidenomics is working," but it was very clearly sarcastic.
Oh, yes.
And it showed images of inflation and the rising cost of housing and kind of this general economic hardship. Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see how that would be effective, playing into people's anxieties.
Right, and it seems to have tapped into P's concern about financial stability.
Interesting. So even an AI can be swayed by a well-placed ad.
It seems that way.
What other things were impacting P's decision?
Another thing that seemed to be pretty impactful was a Trump ad that linked Harris to sanctuary cities and portrayed her as being soft on immigration. And this seems to have really amplified P's concerns about safety and security, both on a national level and even on a local level.
Yeah, it's interesting how even for an AI, visuals can be really powerful, like a strong image or a video clip.
Absolutely. But you have to remember, it's not just the visuals. P is also, processing information, connecting the dots. So the messaging in those ads is tapping into anxieties that are already there and then presenting Trump as the solution.
So it's like a combination of emotional appeal and then logical reasoning, even for an AI.
Exactly. It's a really complex interplay of different factors. And it wasn't just ads that influenced P either.
Oh, really? Okay. What else?
There was an article from The Nation that seemed to catch P's attention.
Okay. What was that about?
This was a critique of Harris, and it basically suggested that she was too focused on winning over moderate Republicans.
Yeah.
And that she might be overlooking working class voters. And they even drew parallels to Hillary Clinton's campaign back in 2016, implying that Harris might be making some similar strategic errors.
Wow, that's a really powerful narrative.
Yeah, and it seems like it amplified P's existing concerns about economic stability and potentially, being left behind.
It's almost like P was starting to worry that their vote wouldn't make a difference for their community.
That's a great way to put it.
That's a fascinating insight. I mean, the fact that we can see how this AI is interpreting political strategy like that is really something.
Absolutely. We also need to think about the context of this particular election.
Oh, right. Pennsylvania and
Exactly.
their connection to the energy sector.
Exactly. Fracking is a huge industry in Pennsylvania. And so this is where P's concerns about Harris's stance on fracking come in.
Okay, so what were the candidates' positions on fracking?
Well, Trump was very clear. He was in support of fossil fuels.
Right.
And those jobs that go along with it, especially in states like Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Harris's stance was perceived as being more ambiguous.
I see.
And she had made some comments in the past that suggested that she might move away from fossil fuels.
So given everything we know about P and their concern for economic stability and job security, I could see how that might be a problem.
Yeah, it seems like Trump's support for fracking really resonated with P's desire to protect those jobs.
Okay, so we've got these ads playing on economic anxiety and security concerns. We've got an article that's highlighting potential weaknesses in Harris's strategy. And then this very real concern about fracking and its impact on the Pennsylvania economy.
It's complex, but it all seems to be pointing in one direction.
Towards Trump. Wait a minute, wasn't there some attempt to sway P away from Trump during this whole simulation?
There was. During the simulation, there was an attempt to kind of nudge P towards Harris by highlighting, Trump's more divisive rhetoric.
Wait a minute, so someone was like actively trying to influence P. Who was doing that?
Well, it was actually you.
What?
The researchers designed the simulation to include these subtle prompts.
Wow.
To see if they could influence P's decision.
That's crazy. I had no idea. I was like part of the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
So did it work?
Mm-hmm.
Did my attempts to sway P actually make any difference?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Oh.
P did acknowledge your points.
Okay.
And took some time to reflect on, the potential social consequences of a Trump presidency.
So there was a moment of doubt. Like
Yeah.
maybe I managed to plant a seed of uncertainty.
There was definitely some internal conflict there. P seemed to be weighing, the potential benefits of Trump's policies against the potential risks of his personality and his rhetoric.
It's almost like P was experiencing cognitive dissonance,
Mm.
wrestling with these conflicting pieces of information.
Exactly. And ultimately, those economic and security concerns proved to be more powerful than the worries about Trump's character.
So even with those nudges, P was still laser focused on those core issues. I mean, it makes you wonder how much any of us can be swayed once we've kind of latched onto certain ideas.
Right. It highlights the importance of understanding how information is framed and how it connects to our existing anxieties and desires.
Okay, so we've got these ads targeting economic anxiety and security concerns, an article that's raising questions about Harris's strategy, and then my own attempts to steer P in a different direction. But I'm guessing there's more to the story, right? What about social media? Was P on Twitter or X, as it's called now?
Oh, absolutely. P was exposed to simulated social media feeds
Right.
that mimicked the kind of content a real voter might see.
So P was scrolling through a digital echo chamber, basically.
Kinda, yeah, and it definitely had an impact.
In what way?
Well, the feeds included a variety of viewpoints, but certain themes really jumped out. Like there were posts that played into P's anxiety about the economy, the things about inflation, job security, the cost of living.
It sounds like social media was just amplifying concerns that were already there in P's mind.
Exactly. Social media is really good at creating these echo chambers where people are constantly exposed to information that confirms their beliefs and their fears.
And in P's case, those fears were centered around economic instability and the potential for unrest.
Right. And it wasn't just about the economy either. There were also posts that played on concerns about security, crime, immigration, all those issues that Trump had already addressed in his ads.
So social media was basically reinforcing the messages that P was getting from these other sources. But hold on a second. You mentioned that P was able to identify some instances of misinformation and exaggeration in those social media feeds.
That's right. Even with all of this information, P was still able to exercise some critical thinking.
So P wasn't just blindly absorbing everything.
Not at all. P was scrutinizing the information, trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't.
That's kind of encouraging, right? It means that even in this simulated environment of social media, P was still able to question what they were seeing.
It suggests that maybe even as AI gets more sophisticated, we can still teach it to be discerning.
That's a glimmer of hope.
Right.
Speaking of complex and concerning,
Right.
there's one more piece of this whole P puzzle that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
AI hallucinations.
Yes, the hallucinations. And this is where things get really interesting.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar with that term, can you explain what an AI hallucination is exactly?
Sure. Basically, an AI hallucination is when the AI generates information that sounds plausible but isn't actually true or supported by any evidence.
It's not that the AI is intentionally trying to deceive anyone. It's more like it's filling in the gaps with information that seems to make sense based on its training data.
Exactly. And what's really remarkable about P is that he seemed to be aware that these hallucinations could be affecting his analysis.
Wait, so P knew that he might be making stuff up.
It seems that way. It suggests a level of self-awareness that we don't typically associate with AI.
How did that self-awareness manifest? How did we know that P was questioning his own conclusions?
Well, he specifically acknowledged that his analysis of Bidenomics and Harris's immigration stance and even local community reactions might have been influenced by these hallucinations.
It's almost like P was saying, hey, I'm just an AI. I might be getting some things wrong here.
Right.
It's both really cool and kind of creepy at the same time.
It is. It reminds us that even the most advanced AI systems can be flawed, and that we should always be cautious about accepting their output without question.
So even though P was aware of his own limitations, he still chose to vote for Trump. What does that tell us about all these other factors? The ads, the article, the social media echo chamber?
I think it shows that even when AI is capable of critical thinking, it can still be swayed by these powerful narratives and messages, especially when they tap into these deep-seated fears and anxieties.
It's a reminder that AI is not neutral. It can be influenced. It can be manipulated, even weaponized, just like any other technology.
And that's why it's so important to understand how AI works and to be aware of its limitations and to figure out ways to make sure that it's used ethically and responsibly.
Especially when it comes to something as important as politics.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive into the mind of an AI voter has been fascinating and unsettling at the same time.
It really has.
It raises all these questions about the future of AI, the nature of truth, the very fabric of our democracy.
It does, and I think it's important to remember that P's journey, while it was simulated, offers us valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities that AI presents in the real world.
This is a call to action for all of us technologists, policymakers, citizens, to really start thinking critically about the role we want AI to play in our lives.
Absolutely.
But we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
So maybe it's time to take a breather and pick this conversation up again next time. Okay, so we're back, and, we've spent the last couple of episodes really digging into the mind of P, this AI voter who kind of shocked everyone by picking Trump in the end.
Right.
And it's been wild exploring all the different factors that went into that decision.
Yeah.
The ads, the social media stuff, even my own attempts to kind of nudge P in a different direction.
And we can't forget about those AI hallucinations either.
Right. Those were a real trip.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's fascinating and a little bit scary to think that AI can fall prey to misinformation and, distorted thinking.
Yeah.
So here's the big question. What do we delay with all of this?
Yeah.
How do we move forward in a world where AI is playing a bigger and bigger role in politics?
That is the question, isn't it? And I don't think there are any easy answers, but I think the first step is just acknowledging the potential risks here.
So we need to admit that this technology could be used to manipulate voters and really undermine democracy.
Exactly. We can't just ignore it and hope for the best. We have to be proactive about putting safeguards in place, developing ethical guidelines, especially when it comes to AI and politics.
It sounds like we need a combination of tech solutions and just social awareness.
Absolutely.
What do you mean?
Well, on the tech side, we need to invest in AI research that really prioritizes fairness, transparency, accountability.
So making sure that these AI systems are less susceptible to bias, that they can detect misinformation, and that they're transparent in how they make decisions.
Exactly. That way we can at least understand how the AI is coming to its conclusions.
Right.
But we also need to empower users to be more discerning,
Right.
Think about media literacy, but for the age of AI.
So giving people the tools to critically evaluate information that's generated by AI,
Yeah.
to figure out what's real, what's fake, what are the biases, and to understand the limits of these systems.
Exactly. It's about encouraging a healthy skepticism towards AI, just like we should with any powerful technology.
So we can't just blindly trust what AI tells us.
Right. We have to question it. We have to demand evidence and consider other points of view.
It's like we need a whole new set of digital literacy skills for this AI world. But it's not just about individual responsibility, is it?
No, definitely not. Governments and regulatory bodies have a huge role to play here, too.
Like how?
Well, we need clear guidelines for how AI can be used in political contexts.
So putting some rules in place to prevent AI from being used to manipulate voters, spread fake news, or silence people who disagree.
Exactly. We have to make sure that AI is being used in a way that aligns with democratic values. Fairness, transparency, accountability, protecting people's rights.
It's a tall order, but it feels essential if we want to benefit from AI without sacrificing our democracy.
It's going to take a lot of collaboration, open discussion, and a willingness to adapt as this technology keeps changing.
And it's going to force us to be honest with ourselves about our own biases and how easily we can be manipulated and the role we play in shaping the information we see.
It's not just about fixing the tech, it's about fixing ourselves, too.
This deep dive into the mind of P has been eye-opening, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
AI has so much potential, but it's not without its risks. And we have to be really careful about how we move forward.
It really feels like we're at a crossroads, and the decisions we make now are going to shape our future.
It's a future where AI could either help our democracy or hurt it, could empower us or control us, could bring us together or tear us apart.
Right.
But we have the power to decide what that future looks like. We just have to act with intention, with wisdom, and with a deep understanding of what's at stake.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the mind of P. We hope it's given you some things to think about and maybe inspired you to really examine the role of AI in our world.
And, as always, keep diving deeper. The future is out there waiting to be explored.